Berlin Memorial, Places of Remembrance. In the 20s, many well-to-do Jews had settled in Berlin after the turn of the century. For the most part, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and architects had done well in Germany and were thoroughly integrated into its social network. They felt themselves to be not German Jews, but Jewish Germans. To judge from letters and oral history accounts of the pre-war period, relations among Jews and non-Jews were harmonious. With Hitler's rise to power on January 30th, 1933, came the first anti-Semitic laws, and this comfortable world began to crumble. Many of the first laws were blacklists of one form or another, and as such quickly undermined the core bourgeois integration. Further marginalization and isolation of the Jews in the first years of Hitler's reign were assured by ordinances which were, relatively speaking, only a passing humiliation. Much more damaging and far-reaching, however, than the actual inconvenience they caused was the message to the German people inherent in the rules. Their government sanctioned the isolation of an entire race. By the time of the public pogrom, Kristallnacht of November 9, 1938, the Jewish population had been so thoroughly marginalized, and the image of the Jew as inferior throughout the German population, that no large-scale protest followed. From then on, the laws took on a more menacing tone, as Jews were deprived of their most basic social rights. In 1939, the superintendents of buildings were required to hand in new census questionnaires on which the tenants had to enter proof that they were Aryan. Jewish homeowners lost their property, and so-called Judenhauser were designated in the district, where families from all over Berlin were crammed together into single rooms to await deportation. Deportation itself had assumed the face of normality. Even when the first rumors of mass destruction and gassings began to spread, the forced participation and repression on the part of the Jewish organizations had become so common and the danger associated with resistance of any kind so great that there seemed to be no other choice than to adopt its tone and prepare for departure. Many of their non-Jewish neighbors looked on with indifference. They say they didn't see. Yes, there were Jews living in our house, and one day they were no longer there. We didn't know what happened. They couldn't help seeing it. It wasn't a matter of one action. These actions were taking place over almost 2 years. Every 20 days, people were thrown out of the houses. How could they escape it? How could they not see it? In 1988, Andreas Wilke decided to find out just how many Jews had fallen prey to the gradual Aryanization of the area and began the excruciating work of researching all the names of those deported. Ironically, one of his most dependable sources of information was the property files maintained diligently by the Nazis to keep track of their growing wealth as more and more Jewish families were deported. After 12 months of work, Wilke had recorded more than 6,000 names. In response to this overwhelming number, Berlin looked to create a memorial. The proposal of Renata Stee and Friedrich Schnock was unanimously chosen on April 1, 1992. Their design, an installation consisting of 80 signs bearing stylized images on one side and the texts of Nazi laws and decrees on the other, incorporates these basic ideas into a memorial which recreates on a linguistic and pictorial levels the political violence that had gone on in everyday life. The governing principle of the memorial is, in Stee's words, to make visible the conditions which led to an insidiously logical way to the destruction of the Jewish inhabitants. The memorial is meant to show, in other words, that the destruction of the German Jews was not a sudden, irreversible occurrence, but rather a slow process consisting of dozens of rules and laws, some quite petty, which culminated after a number of years in the deportation and murder of thousands of people. Berlin Memorial. This monument was put up in Berlin in 1993. It consists of signs placed on lampposts throughout a part of Berlin which before 1933 had 6,000 Jews. Nearly all of them were killed under Hitler. On the back of the signs are posted anti-Jewish decrees or in some cases statements by the victims. All date from the period 1933 to 1945, the Hitler years. There are 88 here, but actually there are more than 400. In 1933, there were 12 laws. In 1934, there's one decree. In 1935, 4 laws or decrees. In 1936, 4 laws or decrees. In 1937, there were 2 decrees. In 1938, 19 laws and decrees. This is 1 year before the beginning of World War II. Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass. Mobs ransacked more than 7,000 Jewish shops and synagogues. 91 people died. 30,000 Jews were sent to concentration camps. 1939 had 10 events or decrees. 1940 had 3 decrees. 1941 had 10 laws or decrees. 1942 had 19 events, laws, or decrees, one of them being the direct transport of Jews to Auschwitz. 1943, 3 events, laws, or decrees. 1944, there were no laws or decrees issued. This is near the end of the war. 1945, and there is one decree. Think about what this means.